And we've got generally 4 broad categories of functions. Attention, tangible, getting stuff, items, toys, activities. Escaping or avoiding. Many of us engage in these problem behaviors ourselves, right? We just engage in slightly more socially appropriate behaviors to avoid. Yes? Yes. Facebook is a great avoider. And automatic. And we'll talk a little bit about automatic behavior, and I'll spend some time talking about why we're not going to get too deep into automatically reinforced behavior in just a second. We're going to primarily focus on attention, tangible, and escape avoid today. Okay? So tangible is just about getting an item, getting an activity. Okay, so for example, when mom takes Jennifer's iPad away from her, she screams. Her mom usually gives the iPad back to Jennifer because it's the only way to stop the screaming. Makes sense, right? Jennifer now screams more than she used to when mom takes the iPad away. Who's had similar situations to this? Don't be afraid, it's okay, we all have, right? Right, because you don't enjoy the screaming, do you? Right? Oh, please, just stop, here, have it, I don't care, right? I understand, it's okay to admit that, I totally get it. You can only handle the screaming for so long. When Jack stands in the kitchen and cries, Dad comes in, opens the cupboard, and takes out Jack's cookies, his favorite cookies. And he gives Jack a cookie. And Jack is now standing in the kitchen and crying more often than he used to. Who's experienced this? Yes, we have a winner. Absolutely, right? It works for him, and it's the only way, again, to stop the crying. How do I get him to stop crying? I give him the cookie, right? Makes sense. Of course we'd be doing that. When Dad is busy helping his other son do homework, Matt hits the wall with his toys. Dad comes and plays with Matt to keep him occupied. Matt hits the wall more often now than he used to in this situation, right? Insert parent cooking dinner, parent doing laundry, parent talking on phone, right? Parent doing just about anything that doesn't involve the child. Have we had this experience? Yeah, this is around attention. Right? If you're not paying attention to me and you're otherwise occupied, I engage in problem behavior so that you come and engage with me. Right? Because they love you. They want you with them. Right? But realistically, for the rest of their lives, you can't spend 24/7 next to their little bodies entertaining them, can you? That's the problem. Right? But this is behavior that serves to get your attention or your interaction. When mom is cooking dinner, Savannah hits and bites her sister. Mom comes to Savannah and says, Savannah, stop hitting Phoebe. Here, play with this. Mommy needs to cook dinner. You play like a good girl, okay? And Savannah now hits more often than she used to in this situation. Right? Mom's trying to cook dinner. How do I get mom's attention? Well, if I can make my sister cry. Right? Do typical kids do this too? Oh, yes, of course. Again, right? This is problem behavior is not like disability specific, right? Anybody can engage in problem behavior. Here's some escape, avoid, or delay examples. Sometimes individuals don't escape an activity entirely, but they may delay having to do that activity. When his parents ask him to eat a meal, Sam spits and kicks the table. His parents stop asking him to eat the meal and allow him to graze instead. Right? They just kind of like leave food out on the counter and he eats what he wants when he wants. And Sam now spits and kicks more often at the table when asked to eat. Who's a food refusal kind of kid? Who has the food refusal kids? Excellent. We'll be looking at an example of food refusal intervention today. When Dad tells Melanie that it's time to stop playing on the trampoline and come inside, Melanie continues to jump on the trampoline. Melanie's dad waits several minutes before asking again, eventually goes to the trampoline, picks up Melanie, brings her in the house. Melanie continues more often than she used to in this situation. How many of us have had this, right? How many of you think, oh my goodness, I've got it all? Yes, right? We've hit the jackpot. But this is really common, right? Kids want to get out of stuff, right? And if they don't have a more appropriate way, they will engage in problem behavior. Kids want your attention. If they have no appropriate way, they'll engage in problem behavior. Kids want access to stuff. If they have no other appropriate way, they'll engage in problem behavior. They will do what works. They learn. Right? They've learned. Did you teach them to engage in problem behavior specifically? Did you set out to teach them this? No, of course not, but they have learned to do that. Now, take heart, because if they learn to engage in problem behavior to get their needs and wants met, they can learn to engage in appropriate behavior to get their needs and wants met. Again, right, that's kind of this whole idea. I talked earlier about how we used to think that problem behavior was kind of tied to the disability. If you had the disability, you were kind of stuck. Well, actually, no, and that's kind of a hopeful thing, right? It's not very hopeful if you think, well, problem behavior comes with autism, and I can't take out the autism, so I can't take out the problem behavior. Not a lot of hope there. What I'll tell you is, kid with autism was not born with problem behavior. No kid was born with problem behavior. They learned problem behavior, and if they learned problem behavior, they can learn appropriate behavior. So there's your hope, right? They can learn other things to do, and you can teach them. That's the other great thing. You can teach them. Parents can learn how to do this. Automatic reinforcement, I'm going to just talk about it. We're not going to spend a lot of time talking about interventions for this today because it's often a little bit more complex. But this is where the reinforcement does not come from people in the environment. So you're not paying off the kid. Essentially, the kid is paying him or herself off. So for example, when Roxanne has nothing to do and no one to interact with, she makes noises and flaps her hands. No one responds. No one interacts with her when she does this. Nothing happens. She does this now more and more often, right? An example, I worked with a woman who spent most of her life in an institution. She's deafblind, and she engaged in behaviors where she would take any paper product that she could find and she would rub it against her forehead and sit and rock because she spent her life in an institution. And if you're not familiar with what happens in institutions, not anything really happens in an institution. You sit there. There's kind of nothing to do, so you have to come up with something to amuse yourself. And that's kind of what this situation is. In the absence of anything to do, I will find something to do to essentially keep myself from falling asleep. Right? Right? If you're not doing it already, by the end of the day, you'll probably be doing it. The pen flickers, the knee jigglers, the gum chewers, the pen chewers, the hair twirlers, right? You guys all engage in behavior that's maintained by automatic reinforcement. You reinforce yourself too. You just have learned to do it in subtle, socially appropriate ways. That's all, right? We all engage in these behaviors at various times. Another kind of automatic reinforcement has to do with really more about reduction of stress or reduction of some sort of aversive input. For Garrett, after folding a few shirts, which for him is a difficult task, he hums and rocks back and forth for a minute. Nobody notices. Nobody's telling him anything. After a minute or so, he goes back to folding shirts, and he hums and rocks now more than he used to in this situation. It's a difficult task, and he kind of does this. He gets himself to a point where, okay, I'm kind of a bit frustrated. I step back for a minute, I hum and I rock, and I kind of calm down, and then, okay, I go back and try again, right? So in this case, it's a little bit about kind of stress reduction. Okay, I worked with a young man who engaged in vocal stereotypy, humming a lot of very loud vocalizations when he was in environments that were very noisy and when the noise was very loud and unpredictable. He would make noise to essentially drown out the unpredictable noise, and then the only thing really he could hear was the own noise he was producing, right? So this is a bit more complicated in terms of assessment and planning for, and so definitely if these are issues, you want to work with somebody who has some experience in addressing this, and we're not going to really talk about them today because they are a bit more complex. I could spend a whole day kind of just on that, all right? I think most of your issues are going to fall under attention and tangible and escape, and we'll deal with those today.